Hello everyone, this is David from chesslessons.com, and today I'm going to be going over a game in the Under 1300 Blitz ARENA from Lichess between jcoerr or jcoerr 991 and saad123123 rated 1224. The game opened with d4, e6, c4, d5. So far I like black's position. I don't like the fact that black later captured the c4 pawn. Because black's already down a tempo. Black should put more emphasis on getting his pieces out. Even bishop e7 would be fine, and castling as quickly as possible. So instead, black took this pawn, and then his opponent grabbed some space in the center. And now his opponent has these pawns that have access to these squares and a lot of space, and he's going to recapture that pawn back quite easily. A move like b5 would serve no purpose because knight can just capture that pawn for free. So once again, black played a move that shows that maybe he's not putting too much emphasis on castling his king and getting his king to safety. So the bishop recaptured the pawn, so now it's equal material. One thing that black should notice here is that instead of capturing that pawn, maybe white wanted to first develop his knight to f3, adding extra protection to this pawn because it's being attacked 2 times, but it's only being defended 1 time. So anytime that you have 2 attackers on a piece and only 1 defender, what you can do is just take that piece for free and basically win a pawn in this case. So your opponent missed that, and then you missed that this was hanging. So in the future, when you make a move, maybe like knight c6, which I don't recommend, I recommend you get your pieces out and castle as quickly as possible. Keep in mind that it does have the advantage that now you have 2 attackers on a pawn, and if your opponent does give you a free pawn, and you see that there's no following consequences, you should take that pawn. So in this case, you played e5. So this breaks another opening principle of don't move the same piece twice in the opening. This bishop actually on c4 actually is staring down at this diagonal, and by having this pawn on e6, you're blocking this bishop. So by moving him out of the way, it actually makes this bishop a lot stronger. It makes him a potential attacker of the f7 square. So your opponent pushed this pawn. You jumped into d4, and then the knight played to e2. You exchanged a piece over there. And now the first thing on your mind should be maybe a move like bishop to d6, followed by knight f6. And once again, you want to get your king to safety. So you played bishop b4. He broke an opening principle rule of don't move the same piece twice in the opening. And then you played f5. So f5 is a very weakening move. The reason for that is that this diagonal is already weak. This f7, g6, h5, this is a point of entry. You don't want to create points of entry for your enemy pieces to come and attack you. So generally there's a rule, I think Tarash set this rule, that you don't want to move the pawns in front of your king. And since you're planning to play knight f6 and castles, these would be the pawns in front of your king. So until you reach an endgame where you want to avoid back rank checkmates, you don't really want to move these pawns because they're basically going to create entry points to your king. So f5 castles, pawn takes. Once again, we're still in an opening. You haven't castled and you're moving the same piece twice in opening, not something you want to do. And your opponent finds this tactic of check and takes. So one of the reasons why you want to castle your king early on is because when you don't castle your king early on, it creates weaknesses around the king. Like all the other pieces become a liability and a weakness because of the king, because there's checks, and that leads to tactics. So in this case, when you played this check, he didn't have this tactic. There wasn't enough time to play check and then takes. But after this move, you need to anticipate this right away, like following the next move, because there's already a pawn on d5 and there is no knight where you can like defend it with a knight. You need to be aware of this tactic and maybe play a move like bishop to d7, preventing it. So playing f5, I think he can actually do this right away. He can come here, and then any way you block, whether you block with the pawn or block with the bishop or move out of the way, losing your castling rights, he can capture this bishop for free. And that's why earlier on, I suggested that maybe a move like bishop to e7 or bishop to d6 might be a little bit better than b4, because even though on b4 you give this one move check, it could potentially create some tactics. So your opponent found the tactic, he grabbed the free piece, and once again, I don't think this game is 100% lost. I think you could still have chances, but you would need to really get your king to safety. And it's a lot harder now, obviously, because you're down some material. But let's see how the game progressed. You played c6, and I see over here you're moving a lot of pawns on the queen side, and the number one objective should just be get your king to safety. And there's a rule in chess that when the king is in the center, where your king is in the center, you should open lines. And by playing c6, you're giving your opponent the chance to open lines to your king when you want to be actually closing up the position. So c6, pawn takes, bishop takes. Now his knight comes in, gives you a check, and now your king is fully in the center. And we'll stop there because this basically leads to chaos. I know you didn't have another choice. You couldn't go here because there's a discover check, and you couldn't go here because of the bishop. But I would say the main problem with this game, where you can learn to improve, the main learning point is in the opening. One, you're playing the black side. Don't go grabbing pawns until you finish your development. A better continuation here would be something like knight to f6, solidifying this d5 pawn, and then he can't play e4, so you're also, it's dual purpose, so you're maintaining your space in the center. And if he plays a move, let's say like a natural move like knight f3, preparing to castle, then you can play a very quiet move here like bishop e7. And yeah, the game will progress slowly, but you'll get your king to safety, and you won't run into all those issues that you ran into from having an uncastled king, which later on created weaknesses for your other pieces. So I hope you took something from this game, mainly to focus on king safety, and secondly, don't move the same piece twice in the opening, because your primary objective should be to castle your king.